Those who are more powerful have an ethical obligation to consider the less powerful and treat them fairly and justly. When you have more power in a situation, your actions can have a greater effect on those around you. This increases your ethical obligation to act responsibly and care for others. Take their well-being into consideration. Let's take the example of an IT manager, who's the person who runs an organization's computer system. They may be fairly low on the organizational chart, but when it comes to the computer system, he or she has more expert power than anyone else. If the IT manager wanted, he or she could abuse this power. For example, invade the privacy of others, or lie about what the system can actually do, or how fast problems can be fixed, so that he or she can avoid working as hard. Why would this be wrong to do? Well, because he or she was hired to do a job. Others in the organization trust him or her. Now, of course, the government could make laws or the organization could make rules to try to keep the IT manager in line, but the effectiveness is limited because the IT manager has so much specialized expertise and operates rather independently of others. So the reason that the IT manager doesn't abuse his or her power is because it would make him or her a worse person. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. That comes from a Spider-Man comic in 1962. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt also said it in a speech that he was going to deliver at the Jefferson Day dinner in 1945, but he died the day before. He was going to say, "Today we have learned in the agony of war that great power involves great responsibility." So how does power relate to ethical leadership? First of all, you need to own your own power. Recognize the power that you have in your life and recognize when you're subject to another person's power. Number two, look at the impact of the use of your power. When does it have the intended effect? When does it unintentionally harm other people? This is where guidelines and codes of conduct can help you to know how to appropriately use your power. Third, take responsibility for mistakes. Goodness knows, we all make them. The sign of a good carpenter isn't one who never makes mistakes, but one who knows how to fix them. Well, the same thing is true with an ethical leader. And then finally, in your relationships at work and elsewhere, engage. Use your power to try to change the situation for the better, intending no harm to others. As I read over this mini case, consider which bases of power you think are at play. For example, reward, coercive, referent, legitimate, expertise, informational. Here's the story. Joan was hired for a government position on the recommendation of an upper-level manager, Tom, with whom she'd previously worked, and he's now her supervisor. During lunch hour one September day, while she's sitting on a bench outside their building having a sandwich, Tom approaches Joan and starts chatting. Well, after a while, Tom asks Joan for a contribution to a political campaign for the elected head of their government agency. Now, Joan was grateful to Tom for his help in acquiring the job and likes him as a supervisor, but she had decided to vote for the opponent in the election. Was Tom acting unethically, just asking her for a contribution? And also, how should Joan have responded? Well, of course, we want supervisors to practice good ethical leadership. Now, even if Tom's actions did not violate a state personnel rule, it would still be unethical to ask a subordinate to contribute to a political candidate. Why? Well, when trying to influence another person, people rely on one or more bases of power. In this case, referent power, legitimate power, coercive, and reward power all seem to be in play. Referent power is someone's ability to influence others because they identify with, admire, or respect that person. Tom believes that Joan identifies with him because they both work for the same agency, and Joan certainly admires and respects Tom. So Tom is trying to convince Joan to contribute to what he thinks is their common goal or objective. However, they do not in fact share the goal of re-electing the agency head, which is why Joan's uncomfortable with the request. Now, if Tom were not her supervisor, but merely another coworker, Joan could just inform him that they don't share the same goal. Once Tom understood that Joan doesn't identify with the same goal, his attempts to influence her should stop. However, it's a little bit different because Tom is Joan's immediate supervisor and has legitimate, coercive, and reward power as well. And that is what causes the problem. Legitimate power is when a society or an organization gives one the right to exert influence over others who have an obligation to obey requests. During working hours, Tom has legitimate power over Joan because he is her immediate supervisor in the organization. Now, many individuals will comply with requests made by those with legitimate power, even when the request is outside the bounds of that legitimate power. For example, Tom's attempt to influence Joan's political behavior is beyond the bounds of his legitimate power over her workplace behavior. Thus, ethical leaders have a responsibility to wield their legitimate power only within its appropriate sphere of influence. In an organization, supervisors also tend to have coercive and reward power over their subordinates because they can terminate or promote employees, and they have a say in any pay raises and bonuses. Thus, an ethical leader should avoid making requests about non-work related matters due to the possession of coercive and reward power that may lead the target employees or other employees to suspect that penalties and rewards are being given based on compliance with such requests rather than on work performance. Even though Tom may not have threatened to fire Joan if she did not contribute to the re-election campaign, she or her fellow employees may view Tom's subsequent decisions as based on who did or did not contribute to the campaign. And this is going to weaken Tom's ability to lead his employees. Maybe you've seen geese in the sky and you're wondering, why do they form in that V-shaped formation? Well, scientists have determined that the V-shaped formation that geese use when migrating serves two important purposes. First, it conserves their energy. Each bird flies slightly above the bird in front of him, resulting in a reduction of wind resistance for the next bird of about 71%. So following a good leader helps everyone else in the group. But the problem is the lead bird gets no reduction in wind resistance. So you cannot expect one person always to take the lead. Sometimes followers want to just pass the buck up the chain of command rather than taking any action themselves. Now, when it's a big decision in a new area, that may be prudent. We need to see how we as an organization should handle this new situation. But if we do this for every situation, that leader in front is going to tire quickly. When you know what is right in this situation and the policy is clear, don't tire your leader out, having them make every decision big and small. Also, if you are an ethical leader and show through how you perform your job that it's important to do the right thing, then all the burden to guide your organization is not on your one set of shoulders. And for those in official leadership positions, it's important to be able to find others in your organization who you can trust and delegate some decision-making to. This is what geese do. The birds actually take turns being in front. One of them will fall back and let another one lead for a while, so they don't all get too tired. In this way, the geese as a group can fly a lot farther and longer before they must stop for a rest. The second benefit from flying in V formations is that it keeps the birds in the group from losing their way. The greater communication and coordination within the group keeps everyone on track. In the same way, ethical leaders must communicate about the benefits of doing the right thing for the individual and the organization. Among geese, part of the communication comes from the back of the V-shaped formation. The birds in the back honk to encourage the front geese to keep going. So it's important to recognize people who are stepping up and doing the right thing. If you see someone being an ethical leader, say, "I saw what happened. You did the right thing. Great work." Those in the back of the V can show ethical leadership by supporting and recognizing the good behavior of those in the front of the V.